January, getting into the low 20s. More heavy showers compiling into Wales and the southwest during Wednesday evening. Notice the winds here. That low pressure has just moved in a little bit closer, and that's what's going to happen as we go through Thursday and Friday. The low itself moving over England and Wales. Further heavy, slow-moving downpours on Thursday. Again, some areas will start with some sunshine, but it isn't expected to last. And particularly eastern parts of Scotland will see thicker cloud and maybe more persistent rain developing during Thursday. Again, quite mild, but temperatures just a touch down perhaps on Thursday compared to Wednesday as this low pressure moves in, tracking across the country. More heavy showers quite widely on Friday, but it's exiting and things look dry for most of us by Saturday.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton, and breaking tonight, Liz Truss has delivered a historic first speech as Prime Minister from Downing Street as she vowed to fix broken Britain on 3 key fronts.
Delivering on the economy, on energy and on the NHS, we will put our nation on the path to long-term success.
I'll explain why she must be bold like her inspiration Margaret Thatcher to deliver an aspiration nation that rejects the socialist hellscape offered by a Starmer Sturgeon coalition from hell. So that's a special digest coming up next. We'll also take a look at how the newspaper front pages are covering another seismic day in politics throughout the show. Earlier, Boris Johnson used his farewell speech to launch a robust defence of his legacy.
People up and down the country, ensuring that Britain is once again standing tall in the world.
But did the outgoing Prime Minister really make Britain a better country? Our political masterminds return to do battle in the clash tonight. Former Tory MP Louise Mensch, ex-Boris advisor Colbert Ranger and broadcaster Nurinder Kaur, they go head-to-head at 9:25. In a speech decorated with his trademark flair, Boris also referenced a Roman leader who returned from retirement when the call from his people came. So is that the biggest hint yet that he will stage a political comeback? Well, a man who knows him very well is his former advisor, the Conservative peer Lord Daniel Moylan. He assesses the Bojo-sized shadow still looming over politics and the Tory party at 10:15. Outgoing Attorney General Suella Braverman has replaced Priti Patel in the crucial Home Secretary role, and she'll have to take drastic and immediate action to solve the national emergency unfolding on the English Channel. Well, one man who definitely knows what's required is Nigel Farage. He'll react to all the new cabinet announcements live at 9:30. As a leading think tank brands Truss's muted COVID-style energy bailout as terrible but unavoidable. Who's to blame for this energy catastrophe we're facing? That's our big debate at 10. As Tim Davie is grilled by furious MPs and the axing of Sue Barker sees Brits turn off in their millions, should the BBC be defunded? My superstar panel debate that in the Media Buzz tonight. I'm joined by former BBC legend John Sargent, the broadcaster Tonya Buxton, and the author and journalist Rebecca Reid. We'll also take a closer look at this shocking story of an Irish teacher who was sent to prison after a row over gender pronouns. And the Meghan Markle publicity train is still hurtling at full speed.
And everyone was just like, oh my God, you're so lucky he chose you.
She mentioned herself 64 times in her Manchester speech last night, so expect more me, Meghan, and the latest episode of her self-obsessed podcast. I'll reveal all at 10:30. We can all thank our lucky stars that Fishy Rishi Sunak and his globalist agenda have been booted to the backbenches, but do unelected elites like Bill Gates wield too much power in the halls of Westminster? Neil Oliver tackles that at 9:50 in The Outsider. As Trust rules out future lockdowns, why were so many ordinary folks so willing to obediently sacrifice their freedom in the name of COVID authoritarianism? Well, best-selling author and Star Spectator columnist Lionel Shriver is uncancelled to analyse that at 10:40. And the mother of 9-year-old Olivia Pratt-Korbel has made this emotional appeal for her cowardly killer to come forward in the past hour.
Everyone that she met, they all fell in love with her. She left a mark on everyone that she met.
Just heartbreaking stuff. We'll find out if her courage sees her named tonight's Greatest Britain before the end of the show. This is Dan Wootton Tonight. Let's go. But breaking tonight, Liz Truss's top team is taking shape with 12 appointments announced so far. So let's take a look at them. Therese Coffey is the new Health Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister. Kwasi Kwarteng, her close friend and neighbour, will be Chancellor. James Cleverly continues her Ukraine policy as Foreign Secretary. Former Tory leadership candidate Suella Braverman will replace Priti Patel as Home Secretary. Wendy Morton, the first female chief whip. Ben Wallace remains as Defence Secretary. Brandis Lewis takes on the Justice beat. Nadeem Zahawi is named as Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. Penny Mordaunt will be the leader of the House of Commons. Lord True as Lord Privy Seal and leader of the House of Lords. Jake Berry, in the past few minutes, has been named Tory party chairman, while Alok Sharma, for some reason, remains as COP26 president. Thought that was last year, folks. GBNews political editor Darren McCaffrey joins me live now from Downing Street to analyse. Darren, so look, I'm going to be delighted about this. A lot of folk aren't. It's a purge of all of the Fishy Rishi Sunaks. They're gone from the cabinet, Darren.
Yeah, they really have. And immediately after that speech, Dan, Liz Truss left Downing Street actually to go to Parliament to tell people like Dominic Raab and Grant Shapps and Steve Barclay that they would not be in her cabinet. And after those sackings, she came back here to Downing Street, as used to say, to appoint her new cabinet. Historic in many ways. A female Deputy Prime Minister in Therese Coffey, who is a close political ally, who's, you say, will serve as Health Secretary, but also in those 4 ministries of state: Prime Minister, Home Secretary, Foreign Secretary and Chancellor. For the first time ever in British history, not one of those positions will be held by a white man. But this is very much, in many regards, a cabinet of loyalists to Liz Truss. Unsurprisingly, people like Jacob Rees-Mogg are still in there expecting cabinet positions. She's not done what some in the party wanted to do, it seemed, to reach out to wider parts of the Conservative family. But in the end, she wanted to be surrounded by people who were on board with her policy and on board with the people that she could trust in government. What does this all mean, though? Well, it means that we're going to see a new cabinet meeting tomorrow morning before she goes off to her first Prime Minister's Question Time against Keir Starmer at 12 noon. And then we're expecting that big policy announcement, Dan, on Thursday with energy prices. It looks like we're going to see a freeze on the energy cap. It will be a big deal for the new Chancellor and a big deal for the country, as many are concerned about paying their bills this autumn and winter.
All right, Darren McCaffrey, our political editor, is doing a great job today. Darren, come back to us if there's any major new appointments. I'm going to have a special digest in just a moment about why, despite all of the slamming that she has received from the usual suspects today, there's reason to have a little bit of hope. A little bit of hope about a Liz Truss premiership. Then my superstar panel weigh-in. Tonight, the esteemed political journalist John Sargent, the writer and broadcaster Tonya Buxton, and the author and journalist Rebecca Reid. But before all of that, on a very busy news day, here's Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you. Good evening to you. The new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, has vowed to create an aspiration nation, tackling the issues she believes are holding Britain back. In her first address outside Downing Street, Ms Truss praised her predecessor, Boris Johnson, calling him a hugely consequential Prime Minister. Acknowledging the challenges facing the country, she spoke of a bold plan to grow the economy through tax cuts and reform, whilst taking action to secure the UK's energy supply. She said she's determined to deliver.
We will transform Britain into an aspiration nation with high-paying jobs, safe streets, and where everyone everywhere has the opportunities they deserve. I will take action this day and action every day to make it happen. I am confident that together we can ride out the storm, we can rebuild our economy, and we can become the modern, brilliant Britain that I know we can be.
Well, right after that speech, this is the moment Liz Truss walked into Number 10 for the first time as Prime Minister, if you're watching on TV. Accompanied by her husband, she was greeted by applause, traditionally, from Downing Street staff. Ms Truss is Britain's 56th and third female Prime Minister. Well, as you've been hearing tonight, Liz Truss is appointing key positions in her first cabinet, sacking several prominent supporters of her Tory leadership rival Rishi Sunak. James Cleverly has been given Ms Truss's former role of Foreign Secretary. Kwasi Kwarteng is the new Chancellor, taking over from Nadhim Zahawi, who's now Equalities Minister and Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster. Suella Braverman, who herself stood against Truss, is the new Home Secretary. Another Tory leadership contender, Penny Mordaunt, is now the Leader of the House. And Ben Wallace remains Defence Secretary. Brandon Lewis has become Justice Secretary and Lord Chancellor. And as you were hearing, Therese Coffey is now Deputy Prime Minister and Health Secretary, taking over from Dominic Raab and Steve Barclay, respectively. Well, speaking earlier, she refused to be drawn on a possible strike in the NHS by nurses.
We've got priorities A, B, C, D, ambulances, backlogged care, D, doctors and dentists, and we're going to work through that, and we'll make sure that we are delivering for patients.
And are you ready for strikes?
I think we've got to be ready for patients, and that's my top priority, and how we can make best use of our department and, of course, the NHS in order to achieve the best outcomes for them.
And what is your message to the NHS staff, some of whom are maybe demoralised at the moment?
I think that we recognise they've done an excellent work, and I've told you my 4 priorities, A, B, C, D, and that's what I'm going to do.
Therese Coffey, the new Health Secretary and Deputy Prime Minister. The pictures you're watching on television now, Boris Johnson tendering his resignation to Her Majesty the Queen in Scotland earlier on today. Mr Johnson and his wife Carrie spending almost 40 minutes with the monarch before leaving Balmoral for the last time. You are up to date on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. You're with GB News tonight, where now it's time for Dan Wootton Tonight.
Now, just a fortnight ago, I admitted reluctantly and with some sorrow, actually, during my nightly digest on this show, that it's hard not to feel that something fundamental is broken in Britain at the moment. There's a totemic cost of lockdown crisis with soaring energy bills causing households and businesses to fear for their futures, a faltering NHS sucking up 45% of all state funding into its financial black hole, an illegal invasion of migrants via the Channel, an epidemic of crime causing the streets of lawless Britain to feel acutely dangerous. So much in the UK needs to be fixed, and fast. But forgive me for feeling just a scintilla of hope as the new Prime Minister emerged into a stormy London outside number 10 Downing Street to declare she has a vision for this great United Kingdom. Liz Truss, a former Lib Dem Republican whose political and personal path to the Premiership is a great British success story. It's certainly surprising, and she believes we can become an aspiration nation. Sure, it's going to be necessary to clear up this total mess largely caused by locking down our economy unnecessarily for over 2 years. But she believes there's a path to greater things, not the socialist hellscape offered by a Starmer-Sturgeon coalition from hell.
Now face severe global headwinds caused by Russia's appalling war in Ukraine and the aftermath of COVID. Now is the time to tackle the issues that are holding Britain back. We need to build roads, homes and broadband faster. We need more investment and great jobs in every town and city across our country. We need to reduce the burden on families and help people get on in life. I know that we have what it takes to tackle those challenges. Of course, it won't be easy, but we can do it. We will transform Britain into an aspiration nation with high-paying jobs, safe streets, and where everyone, everywhere has the opportunities they deserve. I will take action this day and action every day to make it happen.
Now, I believe she's going to put everything into that mission. The sexist claptrap being spouted about the stupidity of Truss these past few weeks sums up the nasty left. This is an Oxford-educated former executive who has served longer than any other minister in cabinet under 3 different prime ministers to emerge, surprisingly, as the leader of the world's most successful political party. Stupid my arse. But the challenge Truss now faces is on a different level to anything she has faced before. The political establishment, the blob, the mainstream media and the entire Westminster system view her as weak, and they want the Tory party out. So Truss is going to have to be laser-focused, brave and bold, like her obvious inspiration Margaret Thatcher, to push through her reforms with just 2 years before a general election that will determine the future of the union. In fact, it will determine whether we have a union left at all. So today, she laid out the game plan.
Have a bold plan to grow the economy through tax cuts and reform. I will cut taxes to reward hard work and boost business-led growth and investment. I will drive reform in my mission to get the United Kingdom working, building and growing. We'll get spades in the ground to make sure people are not facing unaffordable energy bills, and we will also make sure that we are building hospitals, schools, roads and broadband. Secondly, I will deal hands-on with the energy crisis caused by Putin's war. I will take action this week to deal with energy bills and to secure our future energy supply. Thirdly, I will make sure that people can get doctor's appointments and the NHS services they need. We will put our health service on a firm footing.
Now, tackling just one of those issues would be a challenge for even the most competent administration. But, as Truss said,
strong as the storm may be, I know that the British people are stronger. Our country was built by people who get things done. We have huge reserves of talent, of energy and determination. I am confident that together we can ride out the storm.
we must, because the alternative doesn't bear thinking about. To react now, let me go to my superstar panel. Esteemed political journalist John Sargent, the broadcaster and restaurateur Tonya Buxton, and the author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Well, John Sargent, you of course became a household name covering Margaret Thatcher. When Margaret Thatcher came to office, she wasn't viewed as the Iron Lady.
No.
Lots of people thought she was going to be a flop. Lots of people said she was stupid. Do you see parallels between Thatcher and Truss?
There certainly are parallels. I was outside Number 10 when she made the famous speech on arriving. I held the microphone.
Yes.
And I know what that was like, and people thought she's not very good at speaking, she's not very good at Prime Minister's questions. Callaghan was much better, dismissive of her, and you thought she then grew very quickly into it. And of course they then set her the great test. Will she have the courage and the mettle to be a war leader, which she turned out to be in the Falklands? And of course after that, everyone took her seriously.
Tonya, we need to have hope, don't we?
We absolutely do need to have hope, and I'm fed up with the misogynistic words that are being spoken about Liz. What I like is not that she's a woman, it's the fact that she's only one of 3 people that have gone to a comprehensive school. You know, it's not the big old boys' private school club, is it? She went to a normal comprehensive school, and then she went to Oxford, so
Much
she's
more important,
clearly very clever.
And Rebecca, it fascinates me because the left would be screaming loudly about the diversity of Truss as Prime Minister, and, by the way, the Cabinet and the big office of state. Now, I hate playing that identity politics. I just want people to do a good job. But it is interesting, isn't it, the way that the left seem to want to portray Truss and Therese Coffey as stupid for some reason. Are they threatened? Are your folk threatened by Truss?
I don't think we're threatened. I think most people I know would be perfectly happy to accept that sort of having a comprehensive, educated Prime Minister is a very good thing. And looking at her cabinet, it is the most diverse cabinet I think we probably ever had.
Oh, yeah.
But a lot of that is down to the fact that David Cameron actually put in the hours to try and diversify the MPs. He really did. That was work that he
Well, as long
did.
as other best people the job, that's what I mind about. Want to cross live now to Westminster, where we're joined by the Levelling Up Minister and the Minister for London, Paul Scully. Paul, do you still have your job?
I do at the moment, but that's because I haven't heard otherwise. So I'll probably get a call, I'm guessing, tomorrow to tell me what my fate is. But hopefully I'll at least stay on the job, but we'll see.
And Paul, what has the reaction been tonight to Truss, who you supported, so you should keep your job, essentially purging the Sunak supporters in Cabinet? Was this necessary? Is it completely essential that a Prime Minister facing such difficult circumstances is surrounded by loyalists, or should she have tried to bring the party together more?
I don't think, Dan, I don't think it's necessarily loyalists. I think what you want is a cabinet that are really aligned on their priorities and their approach, because we are taking a different approach to what was there before, which she set out very clearly in a campaign for leader of the party. And so it's really important that, especially Chancellor, because a lot of it was about economics, but those key roles have allies there. But let's look at the government as a whole when it's completed with the other ministerial positions, because we do need talent from right the way across the party to be at the top, making those key decisions that are going to bring some support.
He's expected to be moved into the business secretary role. Paul Scully, thank you so much. Good luck. Hope you don't get that dreaded phone call.
Thank you.
Keep us posted. Back to the superstar panel now. John Sargent, interesting, isn't it? Folk like Jacob Rees-Mogg expected to have major positions. So it isn't a completely diverse cabinet. It's important, isn't it, that there are some of those Tory loyalists there?
Yeah, I think it's also a sign of how, I think she showed it when she was outside Downing Street this afternoon, she's confident. She's buoyed up by the fact that she won and won well with her own party, but also she's got the knowledge, the deep satisfaction of knowing that they can't change her before the next election. That would be just suicidal. So she's got the confidence to say, you know what, I want people in the cabinet that I can work with.
I don't know if Boris agrees with that, Tonya. I mean, he seemed to suggest earlier today that there could be a great comeback. And of course, some Tory MPs already speculating that there could be a leadership challenge if Truss doesn't land on her feet before Christmas.
That needs to stop now. It just needs to stop now. The whole point is that all of the Conservatives and the whole of Britain needs to get behind Liz. because we are in a terrible place. We know, you and I know why we're in this. It's not the war, it's the lockdowns and what they did to us during lockdown. And so the whole of the country needs to get behind Liz. And
Are you
Boris
prepared
needs
to
to
do
go
it,
away.
Rebecca Reed, as someone on the left? Are you prepared to get behind Liz Truss?
No, not unless she does something get-behindable. I'll give her the benefit of the doubt for a few weeks, and if she does something useful, I might be OK with it. But I'm not going to instinctively be like, well, things are rubbish, so I'm going to be nice to the woman who's running it into the ground even further.
But it looks like she's going to do exactly what
On anything
you've been
yet.
calling on.
To be fair, it's only been one day, so it would be a bit surprising if she'd done anything yet. But surely, with any Prime Minister, you have to wait and see what they do and then make a judgment, right?
John,
No?
do you agree with that?
Well, yeah.
I mean, I just feel like we've gone through so much as a country. This is a moment to move on from the completely divisive past year.
Well, I think the seriousness of the situation demands it. I mean, it's all very well. It couldn't be worse. Hardly.
Well, look, on that note, I want to cross to Christopher Chope now, the Conservative MP, who is also at Westminster. Christopher, really interesting. You were meant to be tonight nominated to go on to the Privileges Committee, which is investigating Boris Johnson, and I believe that nomination was pulled by the new government. Is that right?
Yes, it is. This was something that the previous administration put down the motion, and obviously this evening there was a new government and a new chief whip, and she wanted to pause before signing up to the proposition from the previous chief whip. So I think perfectly reasonable pause for thought, and I think that shows a sort of responsible attitude. So it's no big issue, really, I don't think, not from my perspective anyway.
So you still could end up on what lots of Boris supporters are describing as a kangaroo court, and you were expected to bring a bit of balance to this whole thing.
Well, I can't really discuss that. All I know is that somebody suggested I might go on it because there was a vacancy. And having been on the Privileges and Standards Committees before, for quite a long time actually, I volunteered. It's not something anybody relishes as a job, but I thought it would be a responsible thing to do and asked to accept. So that's where the situation is at the moment, and we'll have to wait and see. But it's important that, in my view, that the people who are on the committee who don't wish to be on it any longer should be allowed to leave. And effectively what happened tonight was that Laura, who was on it, is now being forced to stay on it because we haven't agreed on a successor.
Indeed. Look, some breaking news. Jacob Rees-Mogg now confirmed as Business Secretary. The big office of state now filled. You've got Suella Braverman as Home Secretary, James Cleverly as Foreign Secretary, and, of course, Kwasi Kwarteng as Chancellor. What do you make of Liz Truss's first appointments, Christopher? I know you supported her campaign.
Well, I supported her campaign, and I think this is an excellent choice of people to lead the economic departments. And Jacob, I mean, I would have thought actually if he couldn't be business secretary, he could have been chancellor. But I mean, it's great that Liz has got in her top team people who all think along the same lines and are all keen to break away from the Treasury orthodoxy and to do something radical to sort out our economic problems. And I've got absolute faith that that's what they're going to be able to deliver.
Christopher Chope, live at Westminster. Thank you so much. Coming up, outgoing Attorney General Suella Braverman has replaced Priti Patel as Home Secretary, but she'll have to take drastic and immediate action to solve the national emergency unfolding on the Channel. One man who knows what's required is Nigel Farage. He'll react to the new cabinet announcements at 9:40. And up next in the clash, as Boris used his farewell speech to launch a robust defence of his legacy, did the outgoing PM really make Britain a better country? Our political masterminds return. Tory MP, or former Tory MP, Louise Mensch, ex-Boris advisor Colby Arranger and broadcaster Rinda Kerr. Your opinion matters most to me, though. Dan at GBNews.uk. Tweet me using the handle at GBNews. A poll running there now. We're back in 2.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's
news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Time now for the clash. And Boris Johnson bowed out as Prime Minister today with a typically bullish speech in which he launched a robust defence of his legacy.
I'm proud to have discharged the promises I made to my party when you were kind enough to choose me. Winning the biggest majority since 1987, the biggest share of the vote since 1979. Delivering Brexit, delivering our manifesto commitments, including, by the way, including social care, reforming social care, helping people up and down the country, ensuring that Britain is once again standing tall in the world. Together, we have laid foundations that will stand the test of time, whether by taking back control of our laws or putting in vital new infrastructure. Great, solid masonry on which we will continue to build together.
But with Britain now battling the cost of the lockdown crisis, lawlessness and a crumbling NHS, is he right? Has the outgoing Prime Minister really made Britain a better country? Email me, Dan at gbnews.uk, tweet me at gbnews. Our poll running there too. But my super lineup are here to debate that question. Boris's former advisor Colvare Ranger, the former Conservative MP Louise Mensch and the broadcaster Narinder Kaur. So Louise Mensch, you think, looking at it on the whole, Boris has made a positive impact to Great Britain?
I really, really do. And how many prime ministers, having just won a fantastically large election victory, came in and faced the kind of problems that he did? I honestly think that we can say that Boris Johnson literally made Britain better, much to the annoyance of Donald Trump. Under him, we were the first country in the...
Oh, we're just having a look at someone entering Downing Street. Just lost you there, Louise. I'll let you know who that is shortly. Louise,
it's a fabulous dress, whoever it is. Good Lord, look at that. Anyway, as I was saying, Boris Johnson got us the COVID vaccine before anybody else, and he really has dealt with unprecedented crises. He's been a really strong wartime leader. The Ukrainians love us even more than they love the United States, and Boris can't help the enormous problems that he had to deal with. I think when we look back on it, we'll think that Partygate was a trivial thing to get rid of such a successful Prime Minister.
Narinder, when you listen to that from Louise Mensch, it's hard to argue, actually, that Boris, on the whole, look, he didn't do everything right. I've criticised him for lots of things, but on the whole, this was a consequential Prime Minister who changed Britain for the better.
Oh, my goodness, Dan. What planet are you and Louise on? How did he change Britain for the better? He was a dithering, dishonest, lying, scandalous leader. He's left Britain in tatters. What planet are you living on that he rolled out the vaccine? That's one little thing he did, and that was on the advice of the scientists.
What about
But
delivering
other than
Brexit?
That,
What about delivering Brexit, Narinder?
He delivered Brexit, and what's happened with Brexit? You've got more illegal immigration than ever before. What exactly has Brexit achieved, Dan?
But remember, if Boris Johnson wasn't Prime Minister, the elites in this country, the establishment in this country would have overturned the biggest democratic vote in British history. And just imagine the consequences of that.
Dan, he delivered Brexit almost illegally as well. He did not deliver it. Yes, he did.
How?
He tried to prorogate Parliament. He lied to our Queen. He lied to our Queen about why he wanted to prorogate Parliament as well. And I'm sorry, Brexit has not delivered. More people who voted Brexit now are regretting that. We've got more illegal immigration than ever, Dan. And we don't have the workforce. Our labour force is suffering. We don't have the nurses.
OK,
we don't have the
Narinder, I want to
doctors.
bring Colville in because Colville, Narinder does make a very fair point there, doesn't she? I disagree with most of what she said, but unfortunately, Boris is going to have to accept that he did not stop the illegal migrant crisis and what is now, I believe, a national emergency on the Channel, Colville.
I think you're right. There is a point there. But when we look at the pantheon of prime ministers, modern-day prime ministers, and what they'll be remembered for, and you're asking, Dan, has he left the country in better state than he found it? Well, he met the head-on the big decisions. And the big decisions, as we will keep saying, and whatever Narinder says, dealing with COVID and getting ahead of the vaccine placed us in a position globally to come out of this economic catastrophe in better shape, and we did do.
We had more deaths in Europe. We had more deaths than the rest of Europe. We did not successfully do anything.
You need to check your facts, Narinder, because actually, if you look now at excess mortality and you look at it on the whole, the UK was actually one of the top-performing countries. Yeah. I will say, Louise Mensch, though, I do think Boris made a huge mistake by giving in to the health establishment and the scaremongers on stage, and he locked down the country, Louise. And actually, even though I'm a supporter of Boris, I do find the lockdowns quite unforgivable.
Well, I know that the trouble is, isn't it? It's the dog that didn't bark in the night. We will never know what would have happened if he didn't do the lockdowns. We can't go into alternative history. But I want to make one thing about this idea of illegal immigration. She's right. We've got activist judges, and as a result, it's been very hard to tackle the problem of illegal immigration. But that's not the point about Brexit. The point about Brexit was that loads and loads of immigration that we could not afford was legal under the EU. It was allowed. It was legal.
But now we have more illegal. But now we have more illegal because of Brexit.
Off the table, and we brought in a points-based system, and that was one of the key things that Brexit voters
And I think very often, Colville, that's forgotten when the legacy of Boris Johnson and Priti Patel is discussed. Sure, this Channel emergency, that was not solved, but the points-based system was a complete overhauling of our immigration system, which will serve us very well in the future.
It will. And I think also, let's not forget that Brexit has positioned us with our trade agreements and the way we have bilateral agreements ahead as we move from a globalised world into a more nationalistic world, whether we like it or not, Dan. COVID has done that. We look at the energy crisis. We can see countries deciding as a national basis how they will secure their energy supplies. And we are ahead in that conversation. We are ahead in how we are positioned.
Where are we ahead, Colville? I'm shocked you're saying that. Where? We're in an energy crisis. We are in the worst cost of...
OK, Narinder, you've asked a question. Let Colville respond.
That has positioned us. And we have to also remember that we want to know that this Prime Minister has left us with the lowest level of unemployment in modern-day history. That, again, is based on leaving an economy in a position that could deal with these robust challenges.
Louise, I think you wanted to come in there.
I agree with him completely. You cannot overlook the macro things that Boris Johnson did. Really low unemployment, taking back control of how we regulate our borders. It's now up to us. We're not bound by the EU.
You're not winning. You're not winning. You're losing.
Well, we're not the ones like Germany who are desperately dependent on Russian gas. We now have control over our own destiny, in large part thanks to Boris Johnson, who without him we simply wouldn't have Brexit. And I think
you are deluded. I think you are deluded. I don't know what Britain you're living in today, but it's not the Britain I'm living in today. We are living in a disaster.
So Narinder, I just want to dial down on that. What is it most that you are shocked by living in Britain today, Narinder? Is it the crime? Is it lawless Britain? Because I think that is a huge issue.
The crime and lawlessness is a huge issue right now. That's always been a huge issue, though. That's not just a Boris Johnson issue. I think the biggest thing is our cost of living crisis that we're under now, the energy crisis. I don't know what Louise and Calvira are saying, that we're in a better position. How are we in a better position? People are going to freeze and people are going to die. What planet are you living on? What position are you speaking
Narinder,
from?
I actually think that's really irresponsible scaremongering, because you should wait a couple of days for the plan that's going to be announced.
That's to help the rich people, Dan. This plan is going to help the richer companies. It's not going to help the working classes, Dan.
What if energy bills are frozen?
Well, the tax cuts, then she's not giving the tax cuts to the energy companies. We're going to be making billions of profit. That's what you should have been doing.
Dan, I think, Narinder, you have to recognise that COVID happened. This government, Boris Johnson's government, helped the people who needed help to get through this, both from a health perspective.
They locked us down. They locked us down.
They helped businesses, they helped people, they helped everybody to get through this. I think
They kept us locked like animals in our homes.
Not helping the average
but
person.
Narinder, I'm sorry, the left in this country, and especially Keir Starmer, would probably still have us locked in our homes.
I agree, and that's why I stopped voting Labour. I agree with you on that.
A fascinating spirited debate. Thank you so much to the broadcaster Narinder Kerr, the former Boris advisor Colville Ranger, and the former Conservative MP Louise Mensch. So who do you agree with? Did Boris Johnson make Britain a better country? Bill on Twitter says yes. He made us a better country by getting Brexit done, albeit not perfectly, but at least we are out of the dreadful EU. Hear, hear. From Sam, a wasted opportunity. We should have been sorry, and the public did their bit, but he let us down. And Ansco says he was blindsided by COVID and against his own instincts, led by scientists in the lockdowns. He never had the chance to deliver on what he hoped he would. And your verdict is now in. 48% of you agree that Boris Johnson did make Britain a better country. Fascinating. 52% of you with Narinder. And you say he didn't. Well, we're certainly a nation divided when it comes to Boris Johnson. Coming up, thankfully, the globalist shill Fishy Rishi has been booted to the back benches, but do unelected elites like Bill Gates wield just too much power in the halls of Westminster? Neil Oliver tackles that in The Outsider soon. But first, as Suella Braverman takes on the critical Home Secretary brief, what needs to be done to solve the migrant crisis? Nigel Farage sets out how Priti Patel's successor can shore up our borders and rates Truss's brand new cabinet picks in just 2 minutes' time.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV.
On radio.
And online.
We're proud to be the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Breaking tonight, Liz Truss has begun forming her cabinet as she sets about delivering her ambitious agenda. In the past few moments, Kemi Badenoch has been confirmed as International Trade Secretary. That follows on from the announcement of Kwasi Kwarteng as Chancellor, Therese Coffey as the new Health Secretary and Deputy PM, and Brandis Lewis as the Justice Secretary. But arguably, the most important announcement was former Attorney General Suella Braverman taking over as Home Secretary after Priti Patel's resignation yesterday. The invasion of illegal migrants via the English Channel has become a national emergency, and Braverman will be intently judged on the handling of that crisis. A key step could be freeing the UK from the influence of European judges, and our new Home Secretary has told me just last month that both her and Truss were prepared to consider our position within the European Convention on Human Rights. Watch. Is she committed to leave the European Court of Human Rights?
Well, Liz has told me that she will do whatever it takes to solve the small boats problem. And, you know, if that requires leaving the European Convention of Human Rights, then so be it, yes.
Nigel Farage, I mean, whatever it takes, if it means leaving the ECHR, then so be it. I'm sorry, we are going to have to leave the ECHR. And remember, that was a Suella Braverman policy position when she was running in the leadership election.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Dan, if I'd been a Tory MP, I would have voted for her. No question about it, because when she says stuff, she actually means it. It's genuine. It's real. It's based on conviction. What we don't know about Liz Truss is how much is conviction and how much is telling the electorate what they wanted to hear, in this case being Tory party members. I am doing my utmost to give her, you know, a really, really good level of support in these first few days of the Premiership. But when you stand outside number 10, you know, on your first day as Prime Minister, and you decide to use that to outline your 3 key areas that you will deal with, and you don't even mention the Channel, you don't even mention illegal immigration, I begin to get concerned. Now, I've no doubt what Suella Braverman would like to do. I've actually, to be honest with you, no doubt what Priti Patel would actually have liked to do, but of course Boris never cared about immigration. Boris always believed in open borders. Boris would have given amnesties to every single illegal migrant in the country. Boris was a globalist. But if the Prime Minister allows the Home Secretary to do her job, then we may have some hope. So look, I'm trying to give this new government a fair wind. I'm trying to say, look, I will not criticise, I will not obstruct, I will not try and throw a spanner in, but you need to do the right things. But here's the problem. They need to do them very, very, very quickly.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's no honeymoon period here, is there, Nigel? It's really interesting, Nigel. We're obviously seeing lots of folk enter number 10 tonight. They are moving fast. Kemi Badenoch just officially confirmed as International Trade Secretary. Of course, that was a job that Liz Truss previously held. I have to say, Nigel, I am disappointed about that appointment, though, not because I don't think she'll do a great job there, but I believe what we needed was the anti-woke warrior herself in either education or culture. But it sounds like, from what I'm picking up, Liz Truss's team, perhaps quite sensibly, we're a little bit worried about Kemi resonating too much with the grassroots members because, of course, she was a big threat to her during that early leadership campaign.
Yeah. I mean, it is a truism that a wise general doesn't fight every single battle at once. And she does have the most enormous in tray, I think, of any prime minister. You know, people say Jim Callaghan in 76. I actually think since Winston Churchill in 1940.
Really?
I mean, that's what we're in. And by the way, all this attempt to blame it all on Putin, forget it. The energy crisis is a self-inflicted wound. Low growth, low productivity are all self-inflicted wounds. 12 years of failure of the Tory party, and that's why we've had 4 PMs in the space of 6 years. At least when it comes to some principled economics, we've got Truss talking sense. But does she? And here's the key question. You know, Mrs. Thatcher walked in there in 79, not trying to appease anybody. She was going in to shake the whole blooming thing up, and she couldn't give a damn what people thought or what they said. She had courage. Does Liz Truss have that courage? I don't know the answer to that. You don't know the answer to that, but I'm prepared to give her a fair wind until we find out.
No, I think you're right, Nigel. I've got hope. And as you know, I thought she was the right choice. I certainly don't think Sunak would have been the man for the job at this point. What do you make of the rumoured bailout, Nigel? I mean, we're talking about potentially £95 billion. That's even bigger than the furlough scheme.
We've no idea what the sum is because we don't know what the spot gas price is going to be. I mean, that's the point, you know, and we're talking about it for 2 years, not 1 year. We're talking about it up to the general election. You know, I mean, I've no idea whether over the course of the next 2 years this costs 60 billion or whether it costs 500 billion. I mean, if you do this, you are signing a blank check. But let me just add this quick point. If you cap energy prices at a level that are just about affordable, and we get a cold winter, people will use a lot of energy. And that will then put problems on supply. And once again, you know, Germany may well be in hock to Russia, but at least they have reserves, which they built up over the course of the last few months. We have no reserves. Our genius, pro-EU, just-in-time supply chain Tory party under Cameron and May closed down our storage facility. So, Liz Truss, yes, of course, she must do something with prices. Whether capping the wholesale price of gas is the right thing, well, it's a hell of a big gamble, but she's got to be seen to do something, and I get that. Supply. She's used the word supply once or twice. This is urgent. She needs to tell the country we are prepared to reopen what's left of our coal-fired power stations. She needs to tell the country we're going to start developing onshore gas, and if necessary, the government will invest a stake in those businesses. She needs to tell the country we will be self-sufficient by 2024. And I promise you this, if she can bring us energy independence, if she can leave the ECHR and stop the nonsense over the channel, if she can go for growth by encouraging not just big businesses, but the 5.5 million men and women out there running small and medium-sized enterprises, acting as directors of limited companies or sole traders, and to take the burden of regulation off them, which is one of the reasons I pushed for all those years for Brexit. If she does those three things, she might not just save the Tory party, not just save her job, but save the country. And I say that because, final thought, I believe we are on the edge of a precipice over which complete confidence in the financial system of this country and its standing in the world is about to topple over. Foreign direct investment is drying up. The interest of people around the world to buy our government debt is clearly now being open to question. We are, if she blows this, we will be back to 1976 and maybe even go to the IMF to get bailed out. This is an absolutely critical juncture in the modern history of our nation. Financial ruin is not very far away. And it's because of those reasons, whatever I think about Liz Truss being a Remainer and voting for Mrs. May's deal and all of those things, I am prepared to take her on face value at this moment in time. If she fails, it will be a landslide Labour victory.
My God, there is a lot at stake. A lot at stake. Nigel Farage, perfectly put. And of course, Farage back tomorrow night at 7 p.m. here on GB News. But coming up, as a leading think tank brands Truss's muted energy-style bailouts a terrible but unavoidable policy, who's to blame for the energy catastrophe facing our country? That's our big debate at 10 p.m. Also, we can all thank our lucky stars that fishy Rishi Sunak and his globalist agenda have been booted to the backbenches, but do unelected elites like Bill Gates wield too much power in the halls of Westminster? Neil Oliver tackles that in The Outsider in just 2 minutes' time.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
On radio
and online.
We're proud to be the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Breaking tonight, Liz Truss's cabinet is taking shape. Kit Malthouse is the new Education Secretary, Kemi Badenoch, Trade Secretary. And there he is. Lots going on behind the walls of number 10 tonight. But Neil Oliver is tonight's outsider. And if there's been one positive from the pandemic hell of recent years, it's the growing awareness of just how influential our planet's shadowy, unelected elites can be on sovereign nations. So from the World Health Organization to the World Economic Forum, more people than ever before are asking crucial questions about their globalist agendas, funding and intent. That also includes billionaire Microsoft founder Bill Gates, who has seemingly gone from software developer to global health expert with an obsession with vaccines. Gates famously said jabs were the best investment he'd ever made, so it's no surprise to hear growing concern over his potentially sinister involvement in COVID public health policy. Here's what Tory leadership candidate, she's new leader of the House, Penny Mordaunt, told me when I quizzed her on her own relationship with the one-time associate of Jeffrey Epstein last week. One of the things that people were very concerned about were your links to Bill Gates, because, of course, he is someone who has been very controversial over the past couple of years. His work with the World Economic Forum has worried a lot of people over the COVID pandemic. Do you just want to explain, because I don't think you've ever been asked about it before, what your relationship with Bill Gates is, and do you think he has too much of an influence on British politicians?
So I don't think he has too much of an influence on British politicians. I think he's only come to Parliament a few times in the whole time that I've been there. I got to know him through international development, and he made some investments in some of our universities to help pest control. I know he's not everyone's cup of tea, but I think by and large the world is a better place for having had Bill Gates in it.
So Neil Oliver, Penny Mordaunt there confirming that Bill Gates is at Westminster a lot. Now, she doesn't think we should be concerned about it, but I am, and I know you are too.
I think it's possibly helpful to remember that Bill Gates is an oligarch. You know, we've had decades of being told to be suspicious of and aware of Russian oligarchs, as though those men, and it is almost exclusively men who have achieved hitherto unimaginable wealth, are able to exert influence that they're effectively buying. But we forget to remember that oligarchs don't just exist in Russia, or they don't just exist in Ukraine. That they're in the West, they're in the democratic West as well. Bill Gates is an oligarch, and he is able to buy influence. He's got extraordinary reach on account of his wealth. Whatever you're involved in, whatever you're doing at home, whatever products you buy, whatever brands that you're interested in, the chances are Bill Gates is invested in them. It would be hard as a private person, far less a corporate entity, to be untouched by the influence and the reach of Bill Gates. His fingerprints are everywhere now. Is that necessarily malign? Who knows? I think the question is, someone who's so involved and who does, there's Penny Mordaunt saying that he's been in Parliament or he's had connections to Parliament multiple times. We probably should know more about him, because ultimately he is an unelected individual. He is just a private person, and yet he is able to exert considerable influence over decisions that are made on a global scale because he's fabulously wealthy. And you alluded to the fact that he's not a scientist. He's a successful businessman. He's made his money selling software, but somehow or other he's extensively invested in vaccines around the world. Has been for decades in the third world. With mixed success. As you said, he has freely admitted that vaccines are the best investment he's ever made. I think it's 20-1 is the return that he talks about. He's able to fly under the flag of philanthropy, because the general impression that most people have is of him giving away his money. As though he's got uncountable billions, and by the end of his life he's planning to have nothing left. He'll just have given it all away on good causes. But for all of the money that he gives away via the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, he's making money hand over fist on account of vaccines. The money's going out the front door where people see it, but much bigger sums are coming in the back door. So he is being personally enriched at a colossal rate at the same time as he's able to present himself as a philanthropist. And it does beg the question. You or I get challenged all the time. Dan, you're not a scientist, you're not a virologist, you're not an epidemiologist, you're not this, that, and the next thing, and so why are you talking about this subject? Well, neither is Bill Gates, but somehow or other he's able to have credibility.
And he's the oracle. He's the oracle. He's on CNN, he's on everything all the time. So, Neil, look, today we've seen this new government take shape. How important is it for Liz Truss and these new ministers to declare that they have no interests or connections with the World Economic Forum, and that if they have anything to do with this body, they'll be transparent about it?
Well, I think it would be important, but I don't think it's possible that they can declare that they don't have any interest in or they're not influenced by these organisations. I think to some extent it was probably ever thus. We're probably all being naive if we think that governments 50 years ago or 100 years ago in this country were operating independently of other organisations in the wider world. I think it's simply on account of internet and social media and the way in which we're all sharing information. It's just becoming more and more exposed, the extent to which government figures here are involved. And I think we need to know more about what and who someone like Bill Gates actually is, because there's no doubt they've invested hugely in the media. He spent hundreds of millions of dollars getting favourable coverage for himself. We need to know more about individuals. Bill Gates is not the only one, but he's the one that we're talking about.
And that's why we will keep on this, Neil Oliver. And I know that you will too. Neil, thank you so much. It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, steely Liz Truss kicked off her first day as Prime Minister with a bold declaration to turn broken Britain into Aspiration Nation.
Delivering on the economy, on energy and on the NHS, we will put our nation on the path to long-term success.
And here comes the cavalry. The PM appointed a hard-hitting new cabinet tonight to sail good ship Britannia out of choppy waters, including Theresa Coffey as Deputy Prime Minister and Health Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng as Chancellor and Suella Braverman as the new Home Secretary. Boris has packed up and left, meanwhile, but was his goodbye speech referencing a Roman leader the biggest hint yet that he will stage a comeback?
Like Cincinnatus, I am returning to my plough.
Conservative peer and former Johnson advisor Lord Daniel Moylan gives his take on Boris's legacy and potential resurgence at 10:15. As Truss's COVID-style energy bailouts have branded a terrible but unavoidable policy. Who's to blame for the energy catastrophe facing our country? That's our big debate coming up next, alongside a first look at tomorrow's historic newspaper front pages hot off the press. Plus, adamant Truss has vowed to never plunge Britain into devastating lockdowns again. But just why were so many Brits silent and complicit when they knew the pandemic pantomime just didn't add up? I'm going to dive deeper into this with the Star Spectator columnist Lionel Shriver. She's uncancelled at 10:40. As BBC boss Tim Davie defends bias Gary Lineker in a grilling from furious MPs, is it time to finally defund the BBC? My superstar panel are riled and ready to debate the corporation's future. Tonight, I'm joined by esteemed political journalist John Sargent, broadcaster and restaurateur Tonya Buxton, and author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Plus, Meghan Markle's unstoppable publicity train continues with a new eye-rolling podcast episode.
And everyone was just like, oh my God, you're so lucky he chose you.
Can you guess how many times Meghan referenced herself in her self-indulgent Manchester speech last night? I'll tell you in the media buzz at 10:30. And if you thought trans ideology wasn't sinister enough,
that bowing to something he knew to be manifestly wrong would be a shame and disgrace and a terrible example to students, and he said it would violate his conscience.
Next, why the school teacher who refused to use a student's gender-neutral pronouns ended up in prison as a result of the row. And finally, this heartbreaking appeal from Cheryl Corbell, the mum of murdered Olivia Pratt-Corbell, has seen her nominated by one of tonight's panel as their greatest Britain.
Everyone that she met, they all fell in love with her. She left a mark on everyone that she met.
Heartbreaking stuff. More on that as the GBUJ is revealed. But first, the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Dan, thank you. Good evening to you. Liz Truss has vowed to create an aspiration nation as Prime Minister of the UK, tackling the issues she believes are holding Britain back. In her first address outside Downing Street today, Ms Truss praised Boris Johnson, calling him a hugely consequential Prime Minister. She also spoke of a bold plan to grow the economy through tax cuts and reform, whilst also taking action to secure the UK's energy supply.
We will transform Britain into an aspiration nation with high-paying jobs, safe streets, and where everyone everywhere has the opportunities they deserve. I will take action this day and action every day to make it happen. I am confident that together we can ride out the storm. We can rebuild our economy, and we can become the modern, brilliant Britain that I know we can be.
And straight after that speech outside Downing Street, she turned around, and if you're watching on TV, you can see this is the moment she walked into number 10 for the first time as Prime Minister. Accompanied by her husband, she was greeted traditionally by applause from Downing Street staff. Ms Truss is Britain's 56th and third female Prime Minister. And she's appointing key positions in her first cabinet tonight. James Cleverly is the new Foreign Secretary. Kwasi Kwarteng is the new Chancellor. Nadhim Zahawi is Equalities Minister. Suella Braverman becomes Home Secretary. Penny Mordaunt is Leader of the House, and Ben Wallace remains as Defence Secretary. Brandon Lewis becomes Justice Secretary, and Jacob Rees-Mogg is the new Business Secretary. Theresa Coffey is now Deputy Prime Minister and Health Secretary, and Kemi Badenoch becomes Secretary of State for International Trade, and Kit Malthouse, Education Secretary as well. That's the Cabinet. Well, earlier, Boris Johnson tendered his resignation to Her Majesty the Queen in Scotland. Mr Johnson and his wife Carrie spent almost 40 minutes with the monarch before leaving Balmoral. Now, in other news away from politics, you were hearing from Dan just now. The mother of Olivia Pratt-Corbell, who was killed in Liverpool, has told those responsible they need to own up. Earlier, detectives were granted a 36-hour extension to question 3 men over the incident in which the 9-year-old was shot in her home last month. In a video appeal filmed and released by Merseyside Police, Cheryl Corbell, that's little Olivia's mum, paid tribute to her daughter.
You know you've done wrong, so you need to own up. Like I've taught my kids. You do something wrong, you own up to it.
Cheryl Corbell speaking there. You're up to date on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. You with GB News. Now back to Dan Wootton and Tonight.
Tomorrow's News Tonight now in our media buzz. And we're just learning Anne-Marie Trevelyan will replace Grant Shapps as Transport Secretary, one of the new appointments to the Cabinet as it's really starting to build up. Shapps, of course, another Rishi Sunak loyalist who has been shown the door. First front pages in, these are historic ones, aren't they? The Daily Mirror, left-wing newspaper, as to be pointed out, now fix the Britain you lot broke. They add that another Tory PM stands outside number 10 by making new promises. Overworked and underpaid Britain could be excused for being a tad cynical. Tomorrow's Metro says we can ride out the storm, quoting our new Prime Minister's speech, as Truss makes the economy, the energy crisis and the National Health Service her top priorities for her first days in office. And of course, that new Cabinet will meet tomorrow morning ahead of PMQs, where Truss goes head-to-head with Keir Starmer for the first time. My superstar panel back with me now. Esteemed political journalist John Sargent, the broadcaster and restaurateur Tonya Buxton, and the author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Now, Truss, as we've been mentioning all night, has inherited the most difficult inbox since Margaret Thatcher, and the most pressing crisis facing her is the increasingly crippling energy issue. Despite her opposition to government handouts during the leadership campaign, the new PM is finalising a price freeze which could help millions of hard-up Brits. According to government sources, Liz is gearing up to make her first major policy announcement on Thursday, capping gas and electricity bills at an estimated £2,500 a year as part of a package that could cost up to £90 billion. The move comes as average household bills are set to rise from around £1,900 to just over £3,500 in October. Now, this has been branded a terrible but unavoidable policy by financial experts, with Paul Johnson from the Institute for Fiscal Studies saying the problems with it are twofold. It enormously is expensive and a lot of money goes to people who don't need it. And secondly, if you're holding prices constant, what takes the strain is supply. So that increases the risk that you'll end up with shortages. The details of the package are still being finalised, but we know one thing for certain. We're facing the same type of state intervention as the eye-wateringly expensive pandemic furlough scheme. So Tonya Buxton, I mean, look, I know businesses have to be saved. I know individuals have to be saved from these bills. But this is wrong, isn't it? This is wrong that we're having to do this. £90 billion worth of intervention. That's actually more expensive than the furlough scheme.
Well, the furlough scheme was completely wrong, and it's got us into this place. We have to follow good money after bad. We have to do something, and we have to keep growth going, and we need to help businesses. If we don't help businesses, I'm understanding we have to help people at home, I get that. But I'm glad that she's taken on understanding that businesses need help, because we won't have a pub or a restaurant or a bar or shops to go to anymore, because they will not be able to pay. And if we have no kind of economy, no growth, then we're doomed forever.
Well, no, and you're in that business, Tonya, and it really
We are.
fascinated me. I was reading from the guy who runs, I think it was the Gaucho steakhouses, and he said that at the moment, if you factor in the electricity bills, actually, he should probably be charging £100 for a piece of steak at the moment. Now, obviously, no one would pay, no one would visit the restaurant, so there is a real issue. But, John Sargent, I do agree with the Institute for Fiscal Studies. This is terrible. This isn't a good policy, is it? It might be necessary. It's not good.
No, it's not a good policy. No, it's horrible, necessary policy. Of course, like Margaret Thatcher famously said, you can't buck the market.
Do you agree with
Market's
Tonya that this is lockdowns that are to blame for this?
No, let's not go back all over the lockdown argument, Dan, because I know it fascinates you. But if we could just stick to this. Well, it's coming up on Thursday, honestly, and they had very little time to sort this out.
But how have we ended in this mess?
Well, of course we can go back to the pandemic, we can go back to Putin, we can go back to all sorts of arguments. But at the moment, what they're facing, and I'm pleased to say, as far as I'm concerned, this is non-ideological. This isn't, I disagree with handouts, it's what can we do? And you get the best brains in the Treasury and elsewhere to sit around and say, these are the options. We've got to do something, as you say, that is it.
But what about
Is
the fact
it
that
a
rich
perfect
people are
policy?
still going to receive
What?
this?
No, because that inevitably happens. Just take national insurance. If you then don't go ahead with the increase in national insurance, who benefits? The people who are better off because they're paying more national insurance. So this isn't, again, it's not perfect. What they're concerned about there is, we said that taxes would not rise. This was a rising tax. Liz Truss objected to it in the Cabinet at the time. Rishi Sunak went ahead. She had to agree with it as a collective decision. It's not a very big amount.
But Rebecca Reed, there's a big difference, isn't there, between tax cuts, which of course benefit everyone in society, and a handout to multi-millionaires who can afford to pay their electricity bills.
The problem with that argument about, like, oh, it might benefit the rich is that nobody thinks they're rich. Literally nobody says, I'm rich and I have enough money. And also, the way that you live your life is in proportion to how much money you have. If you have an enormous house and you have to heat it, that is still a problem, even if you have more money.
So millionaires should get help paying their electricity
posh people
bills.
obviously.
Billionaires should get help paying their electricity.
I mean, there's like 9 billionaires in the UK. Slightly more than that. So I think to not do something because 9 people who shouldn't benefit might is unreasonable. But ultimately, A, really posh people don't heat their houses anyway, so we're not really talking about them. And B, ultimately, there is no other option. If we want to have, the one truly great thing about Britain is pubs. And if we want to still have pubs and shops and restaurants and places to go, then we have to do this. And if you want people to have enough money to be able to go to the pub, you've got to be able to give them some help.
Yeah, and I do agree with
unavoidable.
that point. I agree with that point when it comes to business. I guess, Tonya, what my concern is that we see these things become a global trend. So I've seen it so much over the past 2 years. Oh, every country is locking down. We must lock down. Every country is offering a very generous furlough scheme. We must offer a generous furlough scheme. And there does seem to be an inevitability that has been pushed about this. Now, clearly, I think there should be help. Of course I do. But I just wish it was going to be a bit more targeted, because to say that we could just have a £90 million state
If it was, Dan, you're quite right. If it
Yeah.
could be, of course it would be better. Of course it would be better if the money could go to the people who are less well off.
Well, John, I'll make this very simple. I'll make it very simple. Rebecca, I don't need help paying my energy bills, OK? I do not need help paying my energy bills.
Then don't take it.
But you just said, oh, no, everyone thinks they need help
So
heating their house. I actually think it's criminal. I want the tax cuts, right? Because to me, that is a principled decision. I do not need help paying my electricity bills, and I feel upset that I'm going to
most people do.
You can't cherry pick. You don't get your bill from your address, so you just have to accept that this is going to happen. There are other things that you should be getting more upset about, and I completely disagree with John. We have to keep looking at lockdown because it brought us here. It's not the war with Putin that brought us here.
No, this started before the war.
This started before the war because of our stupid energy policies. We should never be in this situation to start with. Why are we paying 55% of petrol money to the government? Things like that could be brought down.
Well, that's a good point, John, isn't it? I know you don't want to go backwards, but, John, isn't that the issue? No one in the media elite, no one in the political establishment wants to admit that lockdowns were the biggest mistake in modern history, and it has resulted in this complete catastrophe that we're facing.
But if you look at these matters, both pandemic and the energy crisis, as a test of your ideological purity, as are you suggesting this is the way that we run the economy from now on? I'm not suggesting that.
But it just
the
seems to be
pandemic, what I remember about the pandemic, which I wish people would concentrate on sometimes, was just how people were in a state of complete panic in government and out of government. They were I know, but they were frightening themselves. They were not. This was
it was
not
genuinely
a calm,
unprecedented. We didn't know what was going to happen.
I'm sorry, I'm a school teacher from Tottenham and I'm a restaurateur, and 3 weeks in I realised that this was a massive mistake and this would have huge ramifications and that children would suffer.
You only needed to have your eyes open.
For 2 seconds.
You know, all you needed to do was switch off the BBC, switch off the propaganda, switch off the government.
I know, but Dan, the idea
stayed
that
at home,
everyone
you
would...
still wore a mask, you still did all the
I
stuff you were
did
told
none
to
of
do.
those things.
No, but Dan did.
What do you mean?
You still locked down, you still did as you were told, you
Well, what
still
was I
stayed at
meant to
home.
do?
If you didn't believe it was right, you shouldn't have.
Well, I've been very open about the
obeyed
fact
it.
that after the first lockdown, I didn't personally follow the rules. I've said that numerous times on the show.
I mean,
Come
who
and
did,
arrest
let's
me.
face
I mean, it was
I
at dinner
will.
at Tanya's
I will
house multiple times.
I will later. Well, at the end of the show, I'll arrest you. Citizens arrest.
So, no, I didn't follow the rules. What I said at the time was, OK, I'll give you 3 weeks. I will give you 3... I was actually opposed to lockdowns. I'm on the record in early March 2020 being opposed to lockdowns. I said, I will give you 3 weeks. Prove it to me that you can flatten the curve in 3 weeks. Oh, by the way, they couldn't. That was blatantly obvious.
No,
and as Tonya says, after 3 weeks, it was blindingly obvious. And Tonya and I were saying, John, we are going to head to economic catastrophe if we do this. And where are we now? Economic catastrophe.
OK, but Dan, wait a moment. What you've got to understand in the middle of this, though, is what you could do politically, not an argument across a table. You are Prime Minister.
She's got to do it.
People want action. You say, no, we'll do it for 2 or 3 weeks, and if it doesn't work, that's it.
She's got to do it. I just wish you could be more targeted. Final word, Rebecca.
What comes next? What are we investing in now? Nick Clegg said no nuclear. If he hadn't said that, we would have some power probably now. Think forward, not back.
He has a huge amount of responsibility to take for this, absolutely. Now, finally, if you thought trans ideology had gone far enough, think again. A school teacher found himself banged up in prison after a row that started with his refusal to use a student's gender-neutral pronouns in class on religious grounds. This is Enoch Berg. He wouldn't play ball when the student in Ireland asked to be called they instead of he, and the Christian teacher was suspended for defending basic biology. But he refused to remain away from the school on paid leave, instead sitting in an empty classroom, declaring he was there to work. In doing so, he broke an Irish court order obtained by the school that told him to stay away. Watch.
Enoch Burke was taken from the High Court this evening to Mountjoy Prison. He told the High Court he didn't want to go to prison, but he said a teacher could only be suspended for an allegation of gross misconduct. He said his religious beliefs were not misconduct. He said bowing to something he knew to be manifestly wrong would be a shame and disgrace and a terrible example to students, and he said it would violate his conscience. Mr. Burke was offered a chance to contemplate the court's decision, but he said he could not purge his contempt of court by holding his Christian beliefs in contempt.
Astonishing. The passionate Sir taught German history and politics as well as debating, and he talked of having a, quote, wonderful relationship with his pupils who knew him as a man of professed morals and convictions. But a judge ruled he was in contempt of court for continuing to breach the order not to attend class, and he was sent to prison. His case resumes tomorrow. Rebecca Reid, Tonya Buxton, John Sargent, do stand by, because coming up as the media buzz continues, as BBC Chief Tim Davie defends Joe Lycett's outburst on a Sunday political show in a grilling from furious MPs. Is it time to finally defund the BBC? My superstar panel are ready to debate the corporation's future tonight. John Sargent, Tonya Buxton, of course, and Rebecca Reid all here. And coming up after the break, Boris has packed up and left, but was his goodbye speech referencing Roman leader Cincinnatus the biggest hint that he will stage a comeback? Conservative peer and former Johnson advisor Lord Daniel Moylan gives his take on Boris's legacy and potential resurgence next.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England,
Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
on radio,
And online.
we're proud to be the People's Channel, Britain's
News channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Breaking tonight, Liz Truss's cabinet is taking shape ahead of her first Prime Minister's questions tomorrow. Ex-Business Secretary Kwasi Kwarteng, her new Chancellor, outgoing Attorney General Suella Braverman, the new Home Secretary, rising star Kemi Badenoch, appointed International Trade Secretary, former Pension Secretary Therese Coffey takes on the health portfolio and becomes Deputy Prime Minister, and former Higher and Further Education Minister Michelle Donlan takes over from Nadine Dorries as Culture Secretary. A fresh start under Truss then, but a certain former PM shadow still looms large over British politics, with Boris Johnson today giving his biggest hint yet that Downing Street hasn't seen the last of him. Delivering his final address outside the number 10 residence that he always dreamed of occupying, the ousted PM sent the rumour mill into overdrive with these comments.
The torch will finally be passed to a new Conservative leader. The baton will be handed over in what has unexpectedly turned out to be a relay race. They changed the rules halfway through, but never mind that now. Let me say that I am now like one of those booster rockets that has fulfilled its function, and I will now be gently re-entering the atmosphere and splashing down invisibly in some remote and obscure corner of the Pacific. And like Cincinnatus, I am returning to my plough.
Now, history lesson for you. Cincinnatus served as consul of Rome in 460 BC, then the highest office in the land. He later quit the city and went to live on a small farm, but returned to Rome as dictator some years later to guide the Republic through a turbulent period of war. So is this the clearest sign yet that Bojo plans on boomeranging back? Here now to analyse. Former advisor to Boris Johnson when he was London Mayor, Tory peer Lord Daniel Moylan. I mean, look, Lord Moylan, to me, this felt blatant. He wasn't even trying to hide it anymore. Boris wants to come back, doesn't he?
Nah, I mean, first of all, you've got to understand Boris's sense of fun here. I mean, he just loves the idea that his last action is forcing the whole media of this country to refresh their Latin history, to make themselves familiar with the classics, to understand and talk freely about Cincinnatus.
Including me, by the way. I had absolutely no idea. I'm going to hold my hands up. I've done a history lesson today.
This is a man who has been promoting Latin and the history of Rome all his life, and here he is at the last moment, and he's forced you all to find out who Cincinnatus was. And the fact is, he lived about 500 years before Christ, 450 years before Christ. We know he was an historical figure, but part of it's legendary. We don't entirely know. But in Rome, if they had a real crisis, they could pick someone to be a dictator and run the whole show. And what's notable about Cincinnatus is that he was a landowner in the days when people still farmed their own land. He came out to be dictator, he solved the crisis, and then amazingly, after about a fortnight, he said, solve the crisis, I'm going back now to the plough. And he just handed back all the power. There's a story that he came back and did it again a couple
Yes,
of years,
and that's
a couple
the
of
point.
years later, and that's the point. But
Because
but
you
that
must
part's
admit,
not
Boris
so
has
sure.
not
That's
given
so
up
sure.
on his political ambitions, though, has
I don't want to say that. What I'd say, from my knowledge of Boris, is he's never a man who actually has sat down. Remember Michael Heseltine famously said he sat down at the age of 20-something and he plotted out his career right the way through to being Prime Minister, which he didn't make, but he almost made. And Boris has never been like that. He's always been a man for taking the opportunities as they arise. And he knows that sometimes they come and sometimes they don't. And he will be focusing now on refreshing himself, on resting. He'll probably start writing his memoirs. They all do, these prime ministers, and making some speeches and things like that over time. And he'll see what comes up. And then if there's a political opportunity, he'd look at that. But he knows there probably won't be a political opportunity. So I don't think he's somebody who's planning anything at all. He is a man who, famously, when he was asked once, when he was mayor, do you want to be Prime Minister? He said, well, if the ball came loose from the scrum. And that's his attitude. If the ball comes loose from the scrum, whether it's being Prime Minister or something else, he'll pick it up and run with it. And if it doesn't, he won't.
He does feel, though, like he is the victim of a great anti-democratic injustice. Now, as it happens, I agree with that. There is a sense of anger and bitterness about what's gone on, isn't there?
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think under the jocularity and the learning, you do just detect this tone that he hasn't been fairly dealt with, and that his achievements have not been properly recognised, and that he was the victim of a really vicious and sustained campaign, which was not about his policies. It wasn't even about parties. It was an attempt to toxify him personally by people who were never going to forgive him for delivering Brexit. And I think, I always thought that was going to happen. I always thought that campaign would go on. I don't think he really was prepared for it. I think he expected that people would put it behind them. We've had a vote, we've made a decision, and now we move on together. That was, I thought, not going to happen. And I think he feels that it was a little bit unfair. But at the same time, life's full of unfair knocks, and Boris knows that. So the idea, I think, that he's going to sit there sort of, resenting it for the rest of his life, it'll be something that's there. But he'll get over that, and he'll think about the future.
OK, but final question, because putting Cincinnatus to one side, we all know that in the same way that Liz Truss idolises Margaret Thatcher, Boris idolises Winston Churchill. And of course, Churchill felt like he was unfairly deposed, in this case by the British public, following World War II. Boris feels like he's been unfairly deposed by his own colleagues following the pandemic. Of course, Churchill did return to be Prime Minister.
Yeah, but I don't think there's any real parallel there, because Churchill stayed leader of the Conservative Party throughout. And throughout that period in opposition.
His party backed him in a way that they...
I think, what Churchill shows you, when you look at the breadth of Churchill's career, twice he changed parties. He was in the wilderness for years when nobody wanted to listen to what he was saying about Hitler and warning about Hitler. He comes back. What he shows you is that life is full of ups and downs. And if you stick to your last and you've got the right message, there comes a time when people listen to you. And that, I think, is the closest thing you can say about Boris. I don't think you can look at any of these patterns and say, Churchill did this, Churchill did that, and Boris is along those lines. But I think the similarity is that Boris knows that life is full of ups and downs. It's full of opportunities. He's a tremendously optimistic person. Whether he comes back in politics or becomes, I don't know, the greatest tango dancer that the world has ever seen. It could be one of those two. It could be something else.
That is quite a thought, but having seen the wedding video where he does a little dance with Carrie Johnson...
He's obviously starting 1 foot forward only.
A long way to go.
A long way to go, but he could do that or something else. Who knows?
Foreign advisor to Boris Johnson, Tory fair Lord Daniel Moylan, thank you so much. But coming up, an uncancelled Liz Truss has vowed never to plunge Britain into devastating lockdowns again. But why were so many Brits silent and complicit? when they knew the pandemic pantomime just didn't add up. I'm really looking forward to diving deeper into this with Star Spectator columnist and best-selling author Lionel Shriver shortly. But next, in the Media Buzz's BBC chief Tim Davie defends the antics of partisan comedian Joe Lycett in what was supposed to be a proper Sunday political show. Is it time we just finally defund the BBC? My superstar battle it out over the corporation's future straight after the break.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
On radio and online. We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Let's return to tomorrow's news tonight now in our Media Buzz. Lots of those historic front pages in. Let's get straight to them. The Guardian leads with Truss's vow to solve the cost of living crisis. The lefty paper notes that while Boris Johnson exited Downing Street in sunshine, Truss entered after a heavy downpour of rain. She's pitched alongside her husband Hugh O'Leary just outside. We can ride out the storm, says the Telegraph, echoing some of the earlier front pages. The paper reports energy bills will be frozen at £2,500 as Truss gets to work on the cost of lockdown crises. The paper also notes that Truss has appointed the most diverse cabinet in history. The Truss era begins with a tax warning, leads the eye, pledges to grow the economy, lower energy bills and fix the NHS will leave taxpayers footing hefty bills in years to come, according to economists. Together we can ride out the storm, leads the Daily Express. Truss's policy of freezing energy bills will prove a huge lifeline to cash-strapped Brits, the paper reports. And the Daily Star takes a break from politics, thank goodness, to reveal Britain is running out of clowns because of visa problems caused by the Ukraine war. Although, I don't like this. I don't like this. They take one final dig at Boris Johnson by mocking him up as one of those clowns. My superstar panel pack now, esteemed political journalist John Sargent, the broadcaster and restaurateur Tonya Buxton, and the author and journalist Rebecca Reid. Now, the British Bashing Corporation, or the BBC as it's formerly known, is under fire yet again after boss Tim Davie was hit by an onslaught of, in my opinion, very valid complaints over bias. The Digital Culture, Media and Sport Committee grilled the Director General over the BB's faltering business model, including questions over impartiality and the future of the licence fee. Watch.
The comedy part of it worked, the Joe Lycett bit.
Well, I think it's slightly bemusing, frankly, and I'm lost on what the point is.
My point is that you're under pressure over it. Obviously.
Well, most of the sort of flack you've been taking this morning has been, if you like, from the left, based on Emily Maitlis, who I suspect some of my colleagues might regard as an active Labour agent for at least part of the time. She was at the BBC, certainly when she was doing that famous or infamous monologue.
Laura Kuenssberg, her show got off to a challenging start by the Joe Lycett debacle, where he was asked on as a pundit, He did this mock applause after Liz Truss left the interview chair, was then immediately asked for his reaction, and he said, "She was the dregs of what they've got available and the backwash of the available MPs."
We can debate the merits of that particular booking. I don't think it displays BBC bias in the slightest.
See, somebody who's ungenerous to the BBC could say, you knew exactly what Joe was going to deliver, and that's why you booked him.
Of course, that grilling came after the so-called comedian Lysett appeared on Sunday with Laura Kuenssberg and was allowed to totally hijack Liz Truss's interview with sarcastic applause and childish jokes about being right-wing. And the corporation's dodgy leadership was thrown into the spotlight again after it was revealed the BBC's decision to axe a question of sport host Sue Barker caused 4 million viewers to switch off. In her memoir, Barker claimed that the countdown to the end began in 2016 when the corporation informed her that they wanted to, quote, refresh the show to appeal to a younger audience. In an excerpt from her memoir published by the Daily Mail, Barker recounts the BBC asked her to lie and tell the country she stepped down voluntarily. She wrote, "I told the BBC to own their decision and declare publicly that they wanted to refresh the show. I wasn't going to lie to make it easier for them. Unbelievably, they then offered me my job back, but as I couldn't help but feel they didn't want me anymore, I declined." So look, lots going on with the BBC, John. Obviously, this is your former employer, so I'm going to come to you first. Do you have sympathy for for Sue Barker?
Sue Barker, no, of course I have sympathy for her. I remember when I left the BBC about 20 years ago, people accused me of bed blocking. You know, people like me should go because I was too old. Well, I don't feel too old now, and that was 20 years ago. So, of course, for the people in those positions that they've loved and the audience have loved them, it's a terrific wrench. But it's got to be done. You can't have you really can't have ageing presenters for sports programmes. I'm sorry, it's just not a good idea. Should it be banned? Should it be illegal? Of course not. But
you think Sue Barker was too old to host
it was just, there had come a point with the programmes that she did which it seemed inappropriate that she should be of her age and her experience. Now, that's a personal judgment. I'm not saying that this should be laid down in law. You've got, gosh, David Attenborough breaking all the rules about age. So it's not simply a matter of that. It's a question of, are the young people coming up that you want to promote? Do you want to refresh the programme? In these cases, I think those particular decisions with her were perfectly justified. She accepts it. What she doesn't like is the way it was done. And of course, BBC management, I know a bit about BBC management, they're not my heroes, really. They often get things wrong. They're often frightened of the staff. It's the only organisation in the world where the managers are jealous of the people who work there.
But Tonya Buxton, surely the ratings prove that John's wrong and the BBC got this wrong, because 4 million people have switched off since Sue Barker has been axed and replaced by these young idiots.
Absolutely. But how stupid are the BBC? So they clearly don't mix with any young people because, you know, I have a household of young people. They don't watch the BBC. They don't watch television in the orthodox way that we watched televisions during our generation. They don't watch it at all. So all you've done is you've lost your core audience. They're not going to attract young people. They're not going to freshen up because they're not interested in watching a question of sport. They're not interested in watching when the BBC tells them to watch it. Everything they do is online. And so it just shows you how stupid the BBC are. They don't understand their audiences at all.
Well, also, lots of young people absolutely love David Attenborough. I hate this suggestion that because somebody's young, they are sort of repulsed by the elderly. And I think that ageism is a scourge in this country. The way that we treat older people is pretty grim across the board. But there is no reason that young people wouldn't be interested in old people. My issue, and I do agree that the BBC does have an issue with ageism, my problem is when we talk about the main bias. Because the problem with the BBC...
Well, the Joe Lysett thing, that was appalling, wasn't it?
No, I don't think so. I thought it was fairly amusing.
Would you have said that if it was a right-wing comedian who did the same thing?
Yeah, I think so.
No, I don't
I'm here, aren't I?
No,
but my point is, the people in government are on the right side. Therefore, the people commenting are commenting on the right. If Labour were in power, the BBC will be commenting on them. You cannot have a balanced conversation about why hasn't the cost of living crisis been addressed better, and then be like, well, the Tory party haven't done anything about it. Why haven't the Labour Party done anything about it? Because they're not in charge.
Didn't the BBC actually on Sunday morning reveal their true colours?
Didn't reveal their true colours. It revealed their incompetence, I'm afraid. This was just a mistake. It was just clearly wrong. Anyone who watched it as I did, and I thought, oh, no. This is not the thing to do. And of course, it plays into the hands of the critics, of which there are, I'm afraid, a growing number.
Don't we just, is the time, Tonya, now just to say enough?
Yes.
Just defund this thing.
Yes.
If you lefties want to pay for it, absolutely fine. We've just got to defund
I
the BBC,
don't agree with the money that I pay to go into the BBC. I'm sad because a lot of some of the apprenticeships things they do are fantastic, and a lot of the music things they do, they're fantastic. But I don't want to be paying Gary Lineker his money, because I think the man is a complete twerp. He commentates on football. He's a commentator on football. And how many millions does he get?
He's very good at that.
He doesn't get millions, he gets several 100,000.
He gets one. No. Gary Lineker gets over $1 million a year. And for what? And I don't agree. I don't agree with the type of wages that they're paying. What you were saying about growing talents, let's get rid of these massive wages and let's grow talent that way. I mean, you've got DJs. You're getting DJs.
Gary Lineker is a very talented, very expert
But the BBC is...
Do you know, so is my dad. My dad, I think, would be a fantastic pundit when it comes to football. There's nothing he doesn't know about it. It's not brain surgery. Any good footballer, Matt Le Tissier, all of these guys, there are so many that he does not deserve to get over £1 million.
£1 million might be too much to pay somebody. I'm willing to accept that. The BBC is more than news. The BBC has an enormous cultural impact. It makes some of the best programmes in the world.
I'm sick of this argument.
Without
I'm absolutely sick of this argument. It doesn't, by the way. There is no way the BBC makes better programmes any more than any of the big streaming services.
The list of things they have made is off the clock.
I know you have a sort of innate loyalty to the BBC, but surely, John, you accept that the licence fee in 2022 is an anathema. This thing should be defunded.
No,
people can choose to pay for the BBC
it's not
if
an
they want.
anathema. It's probably had its time. Now, the only thing is...
Do you agree it should be defunded?
No, because...
Defund the police,
No,
not
can I tell you the mistake you're making, Dan, which you often do, which I shouldn't say that, no, which you very seldom do. Now, you should try and separate these two issues. You can argue about bias and editorial this and so on, but you also then should separate that from what are we going to do about funding.
I can't.
I tell you, the reason for that is the government...
I don't want us to have an army, but I still have to pay taxes that go towards the army.
No, you're not letting me make my point.
Destructive force. Sorry, John, final point.
So is the army.
My final point is simply this. There are lots of people who want to attack the BBC for political reasons. They should do that separate from arguments about how the BBC should be funded, which is a key question about our culture and about our life in this country.
That's far too sensible, John. Makes far too much sense. Far too good of an idea.
Now, it's safe to say Harry and Meghan's unwanted return to the UK yesterday was an almighty flop. The Duchess of Woke gave a tedious and cringeworthy 7-minute speech at the One Young World conference, during which she mentioned herself 64 times. Now, you might have thought that the deafening boos from the gathered crowds outside the venue in Manchester might have put the brakes on the Markle publicity machine. Think again. The latest instalment of the Me, Meghan podcast hit the airwaves today. This time it was US office star and comedy writer Mindy Kaling who was subjected to 48 minutes of narcissistic drivel. Moaning Meghan, forever the victim, used the episode to lash out at people who call her lucky. Listen.
I started dating my husband and we became engaged, and everyone was just like, oh my God, you're so lucky he chose you.
The happy couple has enchanted the world with their real-life fairy tale.
And at a certain point, after you hear it 1,000,000 times over, you're like, well, I chose him too. But thankfully, I have a partner who was countering that narrative for me and going, they've got it all wrong. I'm the lucky one because you chose me.
I presume modesty isn't one of the archetypes she's planning to look into. Can we just say boo? I want to boo that, John.
Oh, yeah, no,
come on.
I just think, what do we do to deserve her?
You know...
And the answer was we liked her too much at the beginning. That's the problem.
Yeah. We gave her a chance.
I adored Harry because he was the naughty one. You know, I'm a mother of sons and I used that little cheeky sparkle. And so when Meghan came along, I thought, this is amazing. I love her. And just wanted to embrace her. And then she opened her horrible mouth and started saying the things that she did and becoming so entitled, not wanting to be a royal because she doesn't want to, because being a royal is not glamorous. There's no fun in standing in Watford on a wet Wednesday shaking hands.
Even you turned off listening to that narcissistic drivel.
Generally speaking, I am off for it at the moment, but I think she does make a fair point that if everyone was saying to you, you're so lucky that person wants to go out with you, you would be a bit like,
I'm sorry,
who was
you're a
saying
bit
that?
lucky
I think people
when
did.
you've married a prince and you're going to be able to live in a palace.
But it didn't
I mean,
work
you
out
are
very lucky for them, did it?
Well, it did,
Everybody
because
hates
as a
them
result
now.
of that, they're raking in tens of millions of dollars and living in a 14-bedroom mansion in Montecito.
Which apparently they can't afford, if you believe the Cut.
No, but the point is that they didn't want to be royals because they don't... Being a royal is... I mean, I couldn't bear it. You have to shake hands with all the ugly people. They didn't want to do that.
They do not want to do the work. Rebecca Reid, Tonya Waxon, John Sargent, do stand by because coming up the crowning moment of the show as we reveal tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. But next, and uncancelled, as Liz Truss has vowed to never plunge Britain into insane lockdowns again. Why were so many Brits complicit over COVID authoritarianism? Well, best-selling author, Star Spectator columnist Lionel Shriver weighs in after we take a very quick look at what's coming up on tomorrow's show.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, can Liz Truss display the steel that's needed to defeat an emboldened opposition? We'll bring you unrivaled analysis of our new Prime Minister's first PMQ showdown with Slippery Starmer. And comedian Andrew Doyle joins me live to discuss his book, The New Puritans, as he takes aim at the vindictive high priests of cancel culture who he says now resemble the Salem witch hunters. Plus, woke slayer Jim Davidson gives his unfiltered take on the issues that matter to you, and I'll break down the day's biggest stories with my superstar panel, former Daily Star editor Dawn Neeson, businessman and activist Adam Brooks, and broadcaster Ashley James. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9pm till 11pm on GB News.
But it's time now for Uncancelled. And this is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. Liz Truss swept into number 10 earlier today, but the story could have been very different if globalist shill Rishi Sunak slithered his way to Downing Street. Disgraced lockdown architect Matt Hancock would have no doubt landed a plum cabinet return, while the likes of the World Economic Forum would have celebrated a Sunak victory. Truss, meanwhile, was a staunch opposer of the liberty-sapping restrictions suffered by this country for 2 years. Here's a reminder of her lockdown pledge during her Tory leadership campaign.
Well, the answer is I did. I did question it. I mean, I was not sitting on the committee that made the decisions. And clearly, in retrospect, we did do too much. You know, it was true draconian. I think there should have been more. I don't think we should have closed schools. Ever. No, I don't think we should. And a lot of children have ended up suffering, you know, educationally with mental health issues as a result of that. And I can assure you and this group here today that I would never impose a lockdown if I am selected as Prime Minister.
Good news, but why did tens of millions of Brits simply nod along and submit themselves, locking themselves up at home and even grassing up their neighbours? Well, I'm delighted to be joined now by top author and Star Spectator columnist Lionel Shriver, who has penned a fascinating column on why so few people put their head above the parapet during COVID, despite clearly knowing something wasn't right. And Lionel, I have to say, I'm not just saying this because I wouldn't. This is genuinely one of the best columns I've ever read in my life, so I was so desperate to talk to you about it. Why did common sense go out the window for so many people during this pandemic?
I haven't completely answered that question for myself, but I think it's worth asking all the time because what was really staggering about lockdown after lockdown wasn't so much the authorities that put them in place, but the fact that people accepted them. And pretty much unquestioningly, and literally overnight with the first one. It was like, oh. When we had subsequent lockdowns, it was as if, oh, here we go, another lockdown, as if we've been doing this for hundreds or thousands of years, when previously a lockdown only applied to a prison or an American school shooting drill. We abdicated every civil right we used to think was inalienable, that it could not be taken away from us. But instead, we imprisoned ourselves in our own homes. We gave the government permission to tell us with whom we could associate, with whom we could even have sex. And there was a lot of de facto censorship of free speech. We had the media speaking with all one voice. And furthermore, not only did everyone more or less go along with it, but the very few people who spoke up and said, hold on here, are we sure this is really effective? And if so, why haven't we done it before during previous pandemics? Why are we copying China of all countries? You know, the few people who voiced concerns were demonized and treated like traitors and murderers. We were murderers.
No, indeed. And I loved all of that. But then I think what I found most fascinating is the theory that you're developing, that this phenomenon is something that's happening more and more in culture, the entire world being swept up in these movements that don't really make any sense, be it, you know, all taking the knee for BLM or trans extremism. And we're just expected to treat them as completely normal and not question things that just a few months earlier would have not made sense to anyone.
Yeah, I think it's worth taking a step back occasionally. And especially during the last 10 years, I've noticed a recurrence of what I would call social manias. Yeah. And they happen very quickly. The obsession with transgenderism, the Me Too movement, the total hysteria, the international hysteria after George Floyd was murdered with the Black Lives Matter movement, and then COVID lockdowns. And I would say we're in another one with the so-called climate emergency. And it's when they take over, everyone says the same thing. They think the same thing. They use the same phrases over and over again. No one brooks any dissent. Any kind of dissent against these social manias is perceived as treasonous or dangerous. And now we have social media controlling us, and because anything that goes against these controlling narratives is misinformation or disinformation. I am a little mystified why this keeps happening. I appreciate the fact that we have had social manias before. Back in the 1990s, for example, there was that weird, that suppressed memory syndrome where everyone decided all at once that they had been abused by their parents when they were babies. Mm-hmm. It was horribly destructive. It tore families apart.
No, it did, and that's why it's so worth questioning, I think, if the acceptance of lockdown is part of something bigger going on in society. All I can recommend is I posted Lionel's column on my Twitter page, at Dan Wootton on Twitter. I implore you to read it. It was such an important piece of work. My goodness, I wish I'd written it myself. Lionel Shriver, top author, Star Spectator columnist, thank you so much. But it's time now to reveal today's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass. My superstar panel are back. John Sargent, your Greatest Britain nominee, please.
Right, my Greatest Britain. It may surprise some of you to think that I'm always critical about her, but no, Liz Truss. She's been brave, she's stuck with the worst problem anyone could probably have, and she's done it with cheerfulness, and she's done it as if she believes she's going to be able to help us all. I hope she's right.
Tanya Buxton, your nominee.
My nominee is the Queen, because just for a small moment she had all the power in her hands. I wish she'd just kept it and run with it.
For about half an hour we had no Prime Minister. The executive power remains with the Queen, and yes. Yeah, maybe you just think it would be better. Although the Queen, not Prince Charles. Rebecca Reid, your nominee.
Cheryl Corbell, whose daughter was tragically murdered fairly recently, who made an agonising, did an agonising interview earlier. Yeah, and I doubt that anybody will actually respond to it, but my God, I wish they would.
Well, look, let's have a look. This was released by Merseyside Police just before we came on air tonight.
Everyone that she met, they all fell in love with her. She left a mark on everyone that she met. You know you've done wrong, so you need to own up. Like I've taught my kids. You do something wrong, you own up to it.
What a brave woman. Of course, Cheryl Corbell is our greatest Britain tonight. Heartbreaking stuff. Union Jackass time now, John Sargent, your nominee. John, who are you going for?
Joe Lycett. I mean, his behaviour on the inaugural show for Laura Kuenssberg, who's an extremely talented, skillful presenter and expert on politics, and to have this guy being so weirdly unfunny in this noisy way, I thought it was embarrassing at home. Totally. He's certainly a jackass.
Tonya Buxton, your nominee.
Gary Lineker, just for being Gary Lineker. Because
Rebecca Reid, your nominee.
Jackass across the board for everything.
Therese Coffey, who is the new health secretary. I'm very concerned about having a health secretary who is pro-recriminalising abortion.
Well, look, I actually went for Joe Lycett last night, so I'm going to go with Gary Lineker, because as Tonya says, why not? He is today's Union Jackass. John Sargent, Tonya Buxton, Rebecca Reid, my fabulous superstar panel. I'm back again tomorrow from 9 p.m. Good night.
Good evening. I'm Alex Deakin with your latest weather update. Tomorrow, more of the same. Just like today, it's going to be a mixture of, yes, a bit of blue sky, a few sunny spells, but also plenty of heavy showers and a few thunderstorms thrown in for good measure, all swirling around this big area of low pressure that's dominating our weather and will continue to control things, well, for the rest of the week. Around that low, bands of heavy showers drifting north overnight, so there's a chance you may get woken up by a rumble of thunder or a flash of lightning. Nowhere immune from the downpours. There'll be lengthy dry spells between the bands of showers, and it's going to be a pretty warm night as well. The air's coming up from the south, so temperatures again likely to stay in the mid-teens in most towns and cities. And again, it's a case of dodging those downpours on Wednesday. We'll see some sunshine in the morning over parts of the Midlands, East Anglia in particular, central Scotland too. Got a wet start in northern Scotland, and then elsewhere, just we'll watch the showers developing, swirling around that area of low pressure. Gusty winds at times, heavy downpours, not great on the roads. 1 minute it's dry, the next minute you're caught in a downpour and a lot of spray and surface water. But again, still quite mild. Temperatures generally getting into the low 20s. More heavy showers compiling into Wales and the southwest during Wednesday evening. Notice the winds here. That low pressure has just moved in a little bit closer, and that's what's going to happen as we go through Thursday and Friday. The low itself moving over England and Wales. Further heavy, slow-moving downpours on Thursday. Again, some areas will start with some sunshine, but it isn't expected to last. And particularly eastern parts of Scotland will see thicker cloud and maybe more persistent rain developing during Thursday. Again, quite mild, but temperatures just a touch down perhaps on Thursday compared to Wednesday as this low pressure moves in, tracking across the country. More heavy showers quite widely on Friday, but it's exiting and things look drier for most of us by Saturday.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland. On TV.
on radio, and online. We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me.
And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
Good evening. Liz Truss has vowed to create an aspiration nation as Prime Minister, tackling the issues she believes are holding Britain back. In her first address outside Downing Street today, Ms Truss praised Boris Johnson, calling him a hugely consequential Prime Minister. She also spoke of a bold plan to grow the economy through tax cuts and reforms, whilst also taking action to secure the UK's energy supply.
We will transform Britain into an aspiration nation with high-paying jobs, safe streets, and where everyone everywhere has the opportunities they deserve. I will take action this day and action every day to make it happen. I am confident that together we can ride out the storm, we can rebuild our economy, and we can become the modern, brilliant Britain that I know we can be.
Well, that was Liz Truss outside Downing Street. She turned round and came inside. And this, if you're watching on television, is the moment that Downing Street staff applauded her and her husband as she walked into number 10 for the first time. Liz Truss is Britain's 56th and third female Prime Minister. And she has been busy too. She's been appointing key positions in her first cabinet pretty much all this evening. Therese Coffey is now Deputy Prime Minister and Health Secretary. Kwasi Kwarteng is the new Chancellor. Suella Braverman becomes Home Secretary. James Cleverly is the new Foreign Secretary. Kit Malthouse is now Education Secretary. And Anne-Marie Trevelyan has become Transport Secretary. Ben Wallace remains Defence Secretary. And Jacob Rees-Mogg is the new Business Secretary. And we're hearing Chris Heaton-Harris is the Northern Ireland Secretary. Well, earlier on, Boris Johnson tendered his resignation to Her Majesty the Queen in Scotland. Mr Johnson and his wife Carrie spending almost 40 minutes with the monarch before leaving Balmoral in their motorcade for the very last time. The pouring Scottish weather. Now, in other news today, take you to Liverpool, and the mother of Olivia Pratt-Corbell, who was killed in the city, has told those responsible they need to own up. Earlier, detectives were granted a 36-hour extension to question 3 men over the incident. A 9-year-old girl was shot in her own home last month. In a video appeal filmed and released by Merseyside Police, her mum, Cheryl Corbell, paid tribute to the little girl.
You know you've done wrong. So you need to own up. Like I've taught my kids. You do something wrong, you own up to it.
You're up to date on TV, online and on DAB+ radio. You're with GB News, where now it's time for Headliners.